Hello, my name is George, and this is the Office of Image Archaeology. And today I'm going to do a short tutorial on the Epson Perfection V700 photo scanner and the things that you can do with that, more specifically about the software. And because we're going to be working with negatives today, and that's what this tutorial is actually about, is scanning negatives, I'll be doing a glass negative. If once you open this particular software interface up, you're going to have different choices. One of them, you could use full auto mode, home mode, office mode, or professional mode. And this is what I use because I want access to all of these settings, and so that's what I choose to use. In this case, because we're doing negatives, you could use a film holder, and that would be one of those. That's for doing, I believe, 120 film and 35 millimeter film, 4x5 or 4x, I forget what they are, but that's large format. The disc camera film, le click. I don't know if you're familiar with the disc camera, but that's actually the film that I got this off of eBay, and it holds 3 at a time. Handy little item. And then we have the area guide. With that's what we're going to eventually wind up using here. So we're going to move this down to film with area guide, matching film with area guide. With the area guide, you want to make sure several things. One is, first and foremost, that you have this tucked down at the bottom down there. But more important, it's up at the right-hand corner with this gap. You have to have this gap, otherwise it won't work properly. And these should be not covered. Make sure that there's nothing on these impeding the. They're just kind of a sensor kind of thing that the scanner looks for. Although otherwise, if they are covered, you're going to wind up with a funny little rainbow going through your images. But that's what it's supposed to look like. You also, if you have one of these scanners, make sure that the cover is not on the top part of the scanner. If that cover is up there, you won't get any light coming through, because this to scan your camera is down here, but you have a light up here. So it's producing the light that you're going to see, or at least that, or vice versa. I'm not really sure which, but either way, you need both of these uncovered. So if you have a glass negative, or any negative, you need to make sure that when you're scanning it, it has to be this side up, the dull side up, and the shiny side down. Dull side cannot be cleaned other than dusted. Do not do anything to this. The shiny side, you can use a soft cloth with some window clean on it. This has, these are pitted. These are not, it's pitted in several places, and you can't do anything about that. But clean it with a soft cloth that has window cleaner on it. Do not spray the window cleaner on here. If you do, you're going to have real issues, because if anything gets on this side, any water-based product gets on this side, you're going to destroy the image. At least ruin part of it for sure. And then once you have it set up, you'll take the negative and you tuck it in the upper right-hand corner up here. Always face it so that you have the least amount of scanning time. If you twist it around, you're going to have a much longer scan time, which takes longer, and you have to sit there for longer waiting for your image to be done. So you want to always face it this particular direction right here. Settings. You'll want to go to the image type. I use if you have positive transparencies, negatives, they're not really negatives, they're positive transparencies, use positive film. If they are negative, use negative, either one of these. But I use negative color on everything, because sometimes things are sepia, or negatives, they tend to age differently, and sometimes you get really cool color out of a negative. So I always use that, and you get a better depth of more detail if you're using color, at least in my experience. If you're, in this case, I'm going to scan at 600 dpi. If you're going to scan for archival purposes something the same size that I'm scanning right now, I would do a minimum of 1200. And anything below that, I'd do at least 2400 down to 35 millimeter. And at 35 millimeter, I'm doing 3200 for just archival work. And if I really want a nice big scan I can print off, I'll do 4800. I very seldom use anything beyond that. It's just unless you're doing a little tiny area. But if you are, the grain is going to be so bad you won't see the image anyway. So 4800 is about tops for anything that I really do. Aside from that, you'll want to go down to these. Actually, the first thing you want to do is before you scan is go down here, and I never scan into my pictures or my documents, because if you do, unless you're really on top of it, you're going to wind up with a huge one file of nothing but pictures within that area. In other words, you need to be more specific about individual sets of negatives or photographs or documents. So I always use other, and I'll come over and I'll make a folder. And in my case, I've already done that. Test 2. I'm going to I'll make a new one. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Go to my pictures and then make a new one, and we'll go ahead and call that test 3. Right? Test 3. Say OK. Sometimes you see up here where it's got the name of the folder. Sometimes that does not appear. I don't know why. It's a fluke in Windows 10. And if that does not appear, when you go OK, it'll come up with a funny message telling you that you haven't got access to that file. If you get that, come over here, browse, go to photographs, or your pictures rather, and then go to test 3 and say OK, and it will appear, or whatever you happen to have named yours as. You can. I've named this one glass negative. You can name it whatever you want to name it. Rename it glass. Call it glass 1, and then you can also do your starting number. You can start it at 100 if you wanted to. I start mine at 001, and that can be adjusted either by, just highlighting and changing, or you can go ahead and you can use the arrows. The next thing, and this is really important, for archival work of any kind, and if you're going to save a photograph for any length of time and reuse it, TIFF is the only way to go. If you do JPEG and you're transferring it from computer to computer or opening and closing it constantly, you lose parts of the information, the digital information. It becomes you just lose part of it. If you're doing PDFs, you'll click on here. You'll use this setting. Bitmaps. I use this particular TIFF setting. Anything else is to me for if you're an artist doing artistic photographic work or something like that, you might use these. I don't use them. I use this setting only. Options. If you're using a Mac, click Mac. If you're using Windows, click Windows. I'm not going into the rest of this. I'm not an artist, and I have little care for any of that. As I said, I'm into the archaeology of it, the archiving of it, and that's really all I do. Overriding any files with the same name. I don't let anything automatically override and overwrite anything that I do. That is one scary proposition. Imagine the number of files you could lose because of a mistake there. Show this dialog box. I would click on both of those. If you're new to this, click on both of those, because it'll make things a little simpler for you, and you can figure out later on what you don't want to use. I don't use these because I'm into I scan so many negatives and photographs that this is just a time inhibitor, and so I won't scan those, or you won't use those. Going down here to the Scanner resolution, we covered that. If you're you can adjust anything you want here. You have a histogram that can adjust your image through the histogram here. You have a tonal correction, and you also have color correction. You can adjust everything that you want. Image brightness, contrast, saturation, color, everything can be adjusted here. I don't do any of that. I adjust everything post-production in Adobe Photoshop. If I'm looking to, sometimes I'll go to scan a negative and it'll be exceptionally dark. You can't see it hardly at all. And in this case, I will use this, and I can bring out enough of the negative that probably isn't worth bringing out anyway, just to see what it was. Sometimes it actually has improved a negative that well enough to where it's worth keeping. So I'll say that. These others I'll show you in just a moment. Here we're going to do a preview real quick here. Remember, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that the dull side is up and the shiny side is down. And it's tucked up into the upper right hand corner. And when I'd also tell you this, when you're putting these negatives on here, you're going to destroy this. This is very soft glass. It seems to me they could have used something a little tougher, but they didn't. So this is what's going to happen is every time you put this a glass negative on there, you're going to touch these corners, which are very sharp, and hit your glass, and it's going to scratch it every single time, almost guaranteed. What I learned to do was to put the negative, a glass negative, on a piece of paper and slide it off and onto your scanner. And vice versa. When you're taking it, removing it, you need to do something very similar. Paper is not as easy to do coming off as it is going on. And what I discovered was I found myself a card that had been laminated, just a business card that had been laminated, and that lamination, that edge was sharp enough to where it could get underneath of the glass negative. I lost that at one point, so I also discovered that I could take an old credit card using an X-Acto knife or a razor blade. I could also go ahead and create a very sharp edge on that business card that would slide underneath of the glass negative. But you got to be careful, because while you're pulling it off, this edge is going to still hit the scanner if you have it too much of an angle. So slide the again, sliding that under the glass negative, and then sliding a piece of paper underneath of that, and then pulling your negative back will really save your scanner table. I am so guilty of not doing most of what I've just told you to do in many cases, and so because I'm always in a hurry. If you want to make your scanner table last a long time, your glass last a long time, do that. Follow those instructions. If you don't mind replacing this glass once in a while, they're about $70 every time you do it. You wind up replacing the glass. This is the way it is. That's what I do. So we have our scan. And voila. I am letting this do some color correction. I'm letting this do a little bit of color correction on its own, and that's why this has come up the way it is. If I didn't, I would hit reset and I would scan it. It would scan out exactly like it is right there. But because I am not interested in the original color on this, I'll let this do this. If you want to know what unsharpened mask does, look carefully at this image. When I unclick unsharpened mask, you notice it gets unsharpened. Now it's it gives it a softness. I think if you're doing something, maybe you're not looking for that detail, you might do that. I've never figured out why anybody would not want a sharper image, but to me, I want it as sharp as possible, because I want to know, I want to see everything I can in the image. I want as much clarity as I can, and to be able to scan in. And as the name implies, image archaeology, I'm always looking for hints of things within the photograph to identify it. A grain reduction, I do use that once in a while, but only when I'm doing something where I want, say it's an image, a portrait, something like that. As a matter of fact, I'll unclick the unsharpening mask for a portrait as well, because you want a little bit more softness in portraits. But as I said, for something like this, I won't use the grain reduction, but I do use unsharpening mask. Color restoration is just going to give you, and it's black and white, it's going to give me a little bit of help there, but it's going to give me too much contrast, and it does wash things out if you have too much contrast. It can help you in some cases. Backlight correction, again, in this case right here, it's not necessary whatsoever, but there are some cases when you would want to use it. Dust removal, in my case, removes not just artifacts from the negative, but it will remove information that I want to see. I don't want it doing any of that. We'll go ahead and scan it. And we go down here looking for it. And there's our image. I don't like Windows 10 Photo Viewer. It's just, I don't like it. I like the old Windows 7 Photo Viewer. I was so much happy with that, but Windows 10, here I am. If you really want to get in, you can go in and see detail. You can. This is not worth doing any real detail shot onto because there's so much graininess in this film, in this negative. But if you wanted to, you can, on the scanner, you can take and delete that. You can take and just highlight or marquee a small area. And you can scan that in at, say, 4800 dpi. If I did that, I would get a very grainy blow up of that little area right there. Well, I'm not even going to do it because it's not worth our time here. But if you wanted to, you could do that. There are some images where it's well worth it. There are some glass negatives, glass slides, or even celluloid that are so crystal clear. The graininess is so minute that doing a blow up like that can reveal an immense amount of information. The last thing is configuration down here. I don't really use a lot of this information. I don't do quality preview. I don't use any of this. You might find a reason for it. I never have. I do everything I do here. These are automatic settings and this sort of thing. If you're doing multiple, you can do multiple scans. Every time you put a marquee, you're going to get a scan. So if you had multiple images on here, you do a separate marquee, and it will scan all those in succession. And so you can, and then you can go and you can get rid of. Well, say you wanted to delete those marquees, you can delete all of them through that. There's a zoom where you can just zoom. This is a zoom preview. So it's going to do a zoom on that little tiny area that I just did the marquee of. So you can see more of what you're looking for to maybe decide whether or not what you want to do. So there are a lot of really cool things about the Epson 700 scanner. I hope I've answered most of your questions. If I haven't, get a hold of me through this video, and I'll see what I can do about answering anything else that you've got going on. Have a really great day, folks, and stay healthy.